Hey guys, Major League Fishing Pro Andy Montgomery giving you my, I ain't gonna say Okeechobee recap, Okeechobee overview, because this is everything from the time we get there all the way through practice, through competition, just everything that went on that week at Okeechobee, which was stage 2 of our season. So when I got to Okeechobee, the weather was really stable. The water was clean, a lot of clean areas. But the forecast, when we looked at the forecast, we knew we had big winds coming, a big northern front coming. The winds was going to blow out of the north and really hard. So in the past, I've been able to, the day after the wind switches back to the south, fish the south end of the lake and had some success doing that. So my goal in practice was I was going to practice the south end of the lake, knowing that I wouldn't be able to fish it the first day of the competition, but hoping I'd find some fish so when the wind changed back out of the south, then I could go there on my second day of competition and catch them. So that's what I did, and I went down to the south end of the lake, and it was really good. Practice was good. I got a lot of bites flipping a big jig with the Magnum raised bug, the Strike King Magnum raised bug, which is a cool deal. It's something that I actually discovered at Okeechobee in an elite event, and just caught a lot of big fish down there on that Magnum raised bug. As a jig trailer, it just works so good to stay not hung up in them reeds, and it's just a great jig trailer. Went down there, flipped the big jig. I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do. It's something I feel like I'm good at. I got a lot of confidence in. This is what I'm gonna do. And I had a lot of bites that day, felt confident that I could go to that area and catch them. Day 2, I knew I needed to practice for that north wind. So I did that. I fished up on the north end behind King's Bar, some other areas that I knew would be protected. Now, the biggest thing about Okeechobee was the lack of vegetation, so which filters the water. So I got a lot of bites that day, probably not quite as good as my first day, but still had a lot of bites. I knew some of them was big ones. It was just really exciting. But here comes that north front, and them Florida bass do not like it, and there's a lot of variables at Okeechobee that you have to deal with. That the fish are more affected by north fronts because it's so shallow. Number one, big winds blow, it can create a wind tide, so water can come up on the whichever end the wind's blowing into, and it can fall where the wind's blowing out of. And what happened this time was that heavy wind, even the protected areas that got water sucked out of them, that tide effect caused them areas to get dirty too because there was no wind. So the first day I tried to start behind King's Bar, it was dirty. I knew I wasn't gonna catch them really fast, and then I just pretty much had to throw it out. I had to find an area that something was filtering the water, and that's what I did. So I went to like the North Shore area because the way the wind was blowing, I wanted to find an area where the way the wind was blowing, the water had to pass through a lot of grass, a lot of Kissimmee grass, because we didn't have the hydrilla to filter water. So I needed somewhere that passed through a lot of Kissimmee grass, reeds, something that the mud or the water would have to go through a lot, so the backside of it would stay clean, if that makes sense. And I went looking basically the first day of the tournament, and I knew a place called Tin House. I'd caught them in the past. The vegetation actually makes a hard turn to the west in this particular area. So coming out of the north, that north wind had to pass through a lot. So I thought maybe the outside edge, I wanted to fish the outside edge, and that was another big deal. I knew maybe the outside edge there would be a little bit cleaner, and it was. So I settled into that area, and I had a good day. I was in 5th. I only caught 4 or 5 bass, but I caught a couple big ones, and it was still a good day because fishing was so tough. The water had fell 20 degrees, and just had a good day. And I felt like going into day 2, the wind was going to change out of the south. I was going to be able to go down to the south end of the lake where I had such a great day of practice and really catch them and possibly win the first round. But when I got down there, the problem was that the lack of vegetation. The wind blows so hard, number one, and the lack of vegetation, that area didn't clean up as fast as it had in the past. Because in the past, when the wind switched directions, it would start clearing up almost immediately. But that didn't happen, and that area was just dead. And the wind was blowing hard that day, but it was blowing out of the south. So I was just stuck there. I'd caught enough the first day to make the cut, whether I caught a fish or not the second day. But I thought I could win there. So I just stuck it there. I only caught one fish. So now we move on into the knockout round. And so now I know I got to fish the north end. And I'm hoping, you know, some areas around Kingsbar or the Kissimmee River are cleared up enough for me to flip the reeds there. And that's what I did. I didn't even go down there to 10 House to start. I started my day right there at the mouth of the river. Was able to catch some fairly soon, quicker. It was warming up. Fish started biting a little moving baits. The thunder cricket came into play. I still flipped the jig, but I was able to just stay right there around the mouth of the Kissimmee River and put together a good tournament. I ended up like 18th, had a chance to make the cut. I was right there at the end of the day. And the reason I didn't go back to the 10 House area is because I knew how hard the wind had blowed out of the southeast the day before would probably smoke that area. So this week was all about the wind and trying to play the wind and making sure you stayed in good, clean areas. And I fished somewhere different every day, every single day, and had a good event by doing that. And also when it was warming, knowing from past experience that you know, these fish start moving around a little bit and you can start catching them on moving baits as it starts warming up. So my damage was done flipping a big jig with the Strike King Magnum Rage Bug on the back, which is, again, it's just a deadly, I mean, this is the one I flipped. It's still got teeth marks in it. It's just a deadly, deadly jig trailer down there. Love it. June bug in color, the 7/6 Custom Pro flipping stick. Again, we talked about this, I think maybe at Eufaula, where I had switched to the 7/6. You know, I'd flipped an 8-foot rod for so many years, and I used to flip a 7/6, didn't lose a whole lot of fish, and then I went to this 8-foot because that's what the trend shows. The bass fishing market trend showed all these anglers using 8-foot rods. That's what you got to do to flip big weights. But what I have found when I went back to this 7/6 is my hookup and land ratios went through the roof compared to the 8-foot rod, whether I'm flipping mats or flipping the big jig. So the 7/6 heavy Custom Pro was very key. On a big weight, a lot of people flip a super high speed reel, flipping big jigs or big weights. Me, I dropped back one to a 7.5 to 1. So this is the Hyper Mag 7.5 to 1, and the reason I do that is it's just less fatigue on me winding that big weight out of a mat or big jig in all day. So I actually drop back one speed, which is not the same as what I say on most slackline baits, most jigs. I use a real high speed, but anything really heavy, I fall back to a little bit slower reel, and it really reduces the fatigue on me at the end of the day. My other weapon that I caught a few on was the Strike King Thunder Cricket. This is the black and blue, and I put a Strike King Swimming Shiner on. This is a KVD Magic Swimming Shiner, which is kind of a light green pumpkinish with a lot of blue flake, and I dyed the tail blue. Really kind of adds into that. Again, the Hyper Mag reel. This is the 7.5 to 1 that I always use for winding stuff. So the 7.5 to 1 Hyper Mag, 7.3 power medium heavy. So I switched to the 7.3 this year, Custom Pro rod, which it's been a good deal for me. It's a great Thunder Cricket rod, spinnerbait rod, all the above. This was on 20-pound tour grade fluorocarbon is what I used on that. This was the new Strike King tour grade braid, and I think I flipped 50 or 55. I can't exactly, it's 50 or 55, something like that. But this is the tour grade, the new tour grade braided line, which this is the first week I really gave it a workout, and I really like that. A couple more little things like here, don't ask me why. Big weights I use paddle, the round knob. I just like it. I don't know why. And then anytime, most of that, everything else other than big weights, then I use just the regular paddle handles that you have to change out. So that's a couple different things I do. It was pretty a really simple tournament for me. It was a good tournament, simple tournament, 2 baits, never really threw a lot of anything else. You know, the first couple of days, all I got out was a jig. And I went, you know, just flipped the jig, and then I knew it was warming up. So the last day, I got my thunder cricket out and used it a little bit. So great week, good start to the season. I've had 2 good events to start the season. Again, Okeechobee was all about the weather, the wind, and playing that because it's such a unique lake. You deal with dirty water, the cold front. You really had to trust the forecast, and that's scary. When you're trusting weather forecasts to develop your plan on how you're gonna fish the whole week. And in Major League Fishing, we have these off days, so you're not on the water every day, so you really have to pay attention to the weather, wind forecast, and factor that into your game plan. And there was a lot of that. Probably the most important factor of a good event for me was factoring the wind into my game plan way before the tournament even started. Before I even got there during practice, is really trusting the forecast, which is even hard to get out. That's even hard to say, but you had to do it at this event because I know how weather dictated Okeechobee is. And luckily the forecast held to what they was. And my plan to attack the weather was good, and we had a good week, and that's it. Now we move on to stage 3. That's the Okeechobee recap. Magnum raised bug, thunder cricket, got the job done. Good start to the season, and we're rolling on to stage 3.